Arsinoe II, daughter of the first Ptolemy, strode through the sun-drenched colonnades of the Alexandrian palace. She was no stranger to strategic marriages. Her first two had made her queen of Thrace and then of Macedon, unions of power that ended in betrayal and exile. Now, she was home in Egypt, a kingdom her family had taken but not yet fully possessed. Her younger brother, Ptolemy II, was pharaoh, but his rule felt precarious, his wife a constant source of court intrigue. The solution, whispered by priests and advisors, was both anciently Egyptian and shockingly Greek, a marriage between full siblings. To the Macedonians, it was an abhorrence. To the Egyptians, it was divine. The pharaohs of old had married their sisters to preserve the sacred bloodline, to become living gods on earth. For Arsinoe, it was the ultimate reclamation of power. She would not be a mere consort, a foreign queen in a hostile court. She would be an equal. This union was not about passion, but about purpose. It was a cold, brilliant calculation to merge Greek ambition with Egyptian tradition, solidifying their dynasty for centuries. She would become Arsinoe Philadelphus, she who loves her brother, and in doing so, she would become a goddess, her image stamped on coins, her name worshipped in temples. It was a history she would write herself, not as a pawn, but as a queen and pharaoh in her own right. In a sun-baked courtyard in Susa, within the Achaemenid Empire, a young woman named Atossa prepared for her wedding. Her groom was not a prince from a rival satrapy or a general famed for his victories, but her own brother. To the outside world, this was an unspeakable act. To her family, steeped in the pious traditions of Zoroastrianism, it was quotota, the next of kin marriage, considered one of the most righteous deeds a person could perform. Her father, a devout nobleman, had explained it to her since she was a child. Their bloodline, he said, was a sacred fire, a gift from Ahura Mazda. To mix it with outsiders was to diminish the flame, to pollute the divine essence. By joining with her brother, they were not just preserving wealth or land, but the purity of their souls. This union was believed to be a powerful weapon against the forces of Ungra Mainyu, the destructive spirit. It was said that the children born of such a marriage would be stronger, wiser, and closer to the divine. Atossa felt no revulsion, only a profound sense of duty and spiritual purpose. She was a vessel for her family's legacy and her faith's highest ideal. As she adorned herself with turquoise and gold, she saw her reflection not as a bride in a controversial union, but as a guardian of a sacred trust, performing an act that would ensure her family's righteousness for generations. Empress Shoshi was a whisper in the grand Heian-kyo court, a presence felt more than seen. At 12, she had been brought to the palace to marry her cousin, Emperor Ichijo, who was only a few years her senior. This was not a fairy tale. It was the masterstroke of her father, Fujiwara no Michinaga, the most powerful man in Japan. For generations, the Fujiwara clan had perfected this strategy: marry their daughters to emperors, ensure those daughters produced male heirs, and then rule as regents for their young grandsons. The women were the beautiful, cultured, and essential instruments of the clan's absolute power. Shoshi's life was one of exquisite confinement. She lived behind screens of state, her days filled with poetry contests, calligraphy practice, and the subtle, deadly art of courtly maneuvering. Her duty was singular: to bind the imperial house to the Fujiwara clan with the unbreakable chains of blood. She was surrounded by the most brilliant women of her age, ladies-in-waiting like Murasaka Shikibu, who was even then composing the tale of Genji. Perhaps Murasaka saw in her young empress the plight of so many high-born women, trapped in a golden cage, their personal desires sacrificed for the ambition of their fathers and brothers. Shoshi's success was not measured in happiness, but in the birth of two future emperors, cementing Fujiwara dominance for decades to come. She was the perfect Fujiwara daughter, a conduit of power, a mother to emperors, and a ghost in her own story. Isabella I of Castile was a master of statecraft, a unifier of kingdoms, and a devout Catholic. She was also the product of a deeply interwoven family tree, a reality that shaped the destiny of Spain and all of Europe. Her own marriage to her second cousin, Ferdinand II of Aragon, was the cornerstone of a unified Spain, a union that required a papal bull to legitimize it due to their consanguinity. For Isabella, these close-kin marriages were not a personal failing, but a supreme political tool. They were the mortar that held her grand ambitions together. She saw Europe not as a collection of separate states, but as a dynastic web of her own making. Her children were her most valuable ambassadors, their marriages meticulously planned to encircle her rival, France. Her eldest daughter, Isabella, married into the Portuguese royal house. Her son, John, married Margaret of Austria, a Habsburg. Her daughter Juana married Philip the Handsome, the Habsburg heir, a union that would create the most powerful empire in the world under their son, Charles V. Her youngest, Catherine of Aragon, was sent to England. These were not love matches, they were strategic deployments. Isabella, herself the result of generations of cousin marriages within the House of Trastamara, understood that blood was the surest guarantee of loyalty. In her mind, the interweaving of her family's blood was not a dilution, but a concentration of power, a holy and political mandate to forge a single, dominant, Catholic European dynasty. In the opulent drawing rooms of 19th-century London and Paris, the daughters of the Rothschild family learned a different kind of arithmetic. While their brothers were taught the intricacies of bonds, exchange rates, and national debts, the women were educated in the equally vital calculus of dynastic marriage. For the Rothschilds, who had risen from a Frankfurt ghetto to become the bankers of European kings in just a few generations, preserving their phenomenal wealth and influence was paramount. The solution was a strict policy of endogamy. Cousins married cousins, and nieces married uncles, lacing the 5 branches of the family, in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples, into a single, impenetrable financial entity. A Rothschild daughter was not merely a bride. She was a living contract, a human bearer bond. Her dowry was immense, but it never truly left the family. Her loyalty was assured. These women, like Charlotte de Rothschild, who married her cousin Nathaniel, were often highly educated, multilingual, and patrons of the arts. They hosted salons where politicians and artists mingled, gathering intelligence and projecting an image of cultural sophistication that softened the edges of their immense power. They understood their role completely. Their unions were the internal gold standard that backed the family's fortunes, ensuring that the Rothschild name remained synonymous with unimaginable wealth and unwavering unity, a dynasty built not on land or titles, but on a shared bloodline and a shared balance sheet. In the heart of the Inca Empire, high in the Andes, the Sapa Inca was not just a king. He was the living son of the sun god, Inti. His power was absolute, his blood divine. To maintain this celestial purity, his one true wife, the Empress or Koya, had to be his equal. There was only one woman who qualified, his own full sister. This was not a choice, but a cosmic necessity. The Koya was the daughter of the moon, Mama Killa, and their union represented the sacred joining of sun and moon, a celestial balance that ensured the fertility of the land and the stability of the empire. While the Sapa Inca could have hundreds of secondary wives and concubines taken from the families of conquered lords, only the son of the Koya could inherit the throne. She was not a subjugated bride, but a powerful political and religious figure in her own right. She had her own court, vast personal wealth, and significant influence over state and religious affairs. She was the matriarch of the Panica, the royal lineage, and her role was to anchor the divine bloodline on earth. For a woman chosen as Koya, her identity was completely subsumed into this sacred duty. She was the moon to his sun, the earthly vessel of a goddess, and the mother of a future god-king, her entire existence dedicated to upholding the divine order of the Inca world. On the slopes of Mount Gerizim, in the modern West Bank, lives one of the world's oldest and smallest religious communities, the Samaritans. They trace their lineage back thousands of years to the ancient northern kingdom of Israel, and their traditions, including their unique version of the Torah, have been preserved with fierce determination. This survival has come at a cost. With a population that for centuries numbered only in the hundreds, they became one of the most endogamous societies on Earth. Marriage was almost exclusively within the community, often between first or second cousins, a necessity to preserve their unique identity and faith from assimilation. For a young Samaritan woman today, this history presents a profound dilemma. The choice of a partner is not a simple matter of love, but negotiation with demography, genetics, and 4,000 years of history. Marrying within the community means upholding tradition and ensuring her children are raised as Samaritans, but it also means confronting a heightened risk of genetic disorders, the legacy of a small gene pool. Marrying an outsider, a choice now sometimes made out of necessity, brings new life and genetic diversity, but risks diluting their culture and straining family ties. She stands at crossroads, her personal choice carrying the weight of her entire people's future. Her decision about who to love and build a life with is a direct engagement with a history of isolation and a prayer for survival. The history of Tristan da Cunha, the most remote inhabited island on Earth, began with a handful of settlers in the early 19th century. For the women who arrived on this tiny volcanic speck in the middle of the South Atlantic, life was a battle against isolation itself. With supply ships arriving perhaps once a year, the community was a world unto its own. As the first generation grew up, the question of marriage became a simple matter of mathematics. There were only a few families, the Greens, the Glasses, the Hoggins. The choice was not between a wide world of suitors, but between the cousins and neighbors you had known since birth. This was not a policy or a religious doctrine. It was a fact of life dictated by geography. A young woman's wedding on Tristan was a union of the entire island, a weaving together of the very limited human threads available. These marriages created a unique and complex social fabric, where everyone was related to everyone else in multiple ways. They also created a unique gene pool, leading to hereditary conditions like asthma and glaucoma becoming common. For the women of Tristan, their lives were defined by this shared ancestry. Their family stories were the island's history. Their choices, limited as they were acts of survival, ensuring that a community could persist in one of the most isolated places a human can live. They were the founding mothers of a unique micronation, their bloodlines the very map of their society. Mariana of Austria, Queen of Spain, felt the weight of her lineage every time she looked in the mirror. She was the niece of her husband, King Philip IV, a union designed to concentrate the pure Habsburg blood that had ruled half of Europe for 2 centuries. This purity, however, had become a prison. The family's defining feature, the prominent Habsburg jaw or mandibular prognathism, was a visible testament to generations of marrying uncle to niece, cousin to cousin. For Mariana, this was not a mark of pride, but a source of profound piety and terror. She was a deeply religious woman, and she saw the constant ill health and early deaths of her children as a divine trial, perhaps even a punishment she must bear with prayer and fortitude. Her purpose was singular and crushing, to produce a healthy male heir for the Spanish Empire. Her firstborn son died as a toddler. Others were stillborn or miscarried. Her only surviving son, the future Charles II, was born frail, sickly, and beset by physical and developmental problems. She watched over him with a fierce, desperate love, her life in the grim, shadowed halls of the Alcazar of Madrid a constant vigil. She was a queen, a regent, and a formidable political player, but her history is most poignantly defined by her role as a mother. Trapped by a dynastic strategy that was now consuming itself from within, her every prayer for her son's health a prayer for the survival of an empire. In a sterile, brightly lit genetic counselor's office, a young woman named Alara looks at a diagram of her own DNA. She is not royalty, nor a member of a remote tribe. She is a modern woman from a community with a long history of endogamy, perhaps Ashkenazi Jewish, Parsi, or from a specific valley in the Swiss Alps. Her grandparents were third cousins, a fact that was once commonplace and unremarkable in her tight-knit community. For generations, this practice had preserved cultural identity, religious beliefs, and a sense of belonging. Now, it presented her with a choice armed by science. The counselor points to specific markers on her chart, explaining the recessive genes for conditions like Tay-Sachs or cystic fibrosis that run through her lineage. Her history, once a source of communal strength, was now a statistical probability map of risk for her future children. This moment was a reckoning unlike any her ancestors had faced. They had made their choices based on faith, tradition, and social necessity. She could make hers based on a detailed understanding of the very code of life. There was no judgment in the room, only information. Her decision, whether to proceed with a partner from a similar background, to seek an outside partner, or to use reproductive technologies, was entirely her own. She was the inheritor of a long, interwoven history, but for the first time, a woman in her line had the power to look at the threads of her past and consciously decide how they would be woven into the future.